Hello, good morning, everyone. I see everyone's joining. Thanks for your patience as we get started here. We have a full agenda planned for you, so we really appreciate you taking time out this morning. My name is Darryl Chappell. I'm the founder and CEO of the Darryl Chappell Foundation. It's a foundation that I started back in August of last year. Our purpose is to enable aspiring artists to achieve their highest potential. And we focus on particular the communities throughout the Western Hemisphere, those who are of African, Sub-Saharan African descent, also Afro-Caribbean descent. I have a great pleasure today of having a very dynamic panel who really is going to, I think, share with you a lot of good insights about Puerto Rico. I have been passionate about Puerto Rico for a very long time. I've traveled to the island over the last 20 years. I've been a big fan of the artwork there, and also a big supporter of the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico. So I'm pleased today that we have a chance to hear from the new executive director of the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico. And I'm just delighted that we have a strong alliance that we've started. So I can only imagine there's probably a lot of technology challenges out there. We'll get to those as they come up, but we are going to really get started with a little bit overview of the agenda. So I'm going to briefly talk about our strategic plan for the foundation, and then quickly turn it over to Marta Mabel Perez, the executive director of the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico. I will then introduce our panelists. I think you'll be very pleased with the diverse panel that we have. There are two panel questions that they've come prepared to talk about, and we'll talk about those a little bit later, but I think you'll get a sense of how they've been thinking about the next program that we're looking to design and launch from the foundation. And then last, as important as us talking is to listen to you. So we'll open up the actual lines proverbially, but you'll be able to send either a chat to us, or you can also let us know that you would like to speak, and we'll turn on your audio so that you can speak. Do not be afraid you'll not show up on video. The way the webinar is set up, we can hear you once we turn on the mics. If you're talking now, we can't hear you. So it's not like we're being rude. We just can't hear you. But during the Q&A segment, we will be able to hear you. The last thing in terms of housekeeping, we do realize that many of you only speak Spanish, so you probably have no idea what I'm saying right now, but we will do both bilingual during certain segments consistently throughout the actual webinar today. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Very, very pleased to be here. So a little background on what we're doing with the Darryl Chappell Foundation. I'm very pleased to have a board of directors of 7 board members, a very strong background across many industries. In addition to the board, I'm very pleased to have 3 strategic advisors. One advisor is an actual well-renowned artist from Cuba. Another advisor is a policy director with a nonprofit outside of Washington, D.C. And then we also have an advisor located in Uruguay that provides us with a perspective of the South American challenges, in particular Uruguay, in terms of laws. Our strategic plan, we're starting first with Puerto Rico by design. Puerto Rico has gone through tremendous challenges over the last 14 years economically. There's been the PROMESA board, which is an economic structure to help the island. There's been numerous challenges through Hurricane Maria. There's been the earthquakes, and now, of course, COVID-19. So Puerto Rico is plenty of opportunities to help, and the foundation is dedicated to focusing on Puerto Rico first. Part of our first strategic plan as well is the mainland United States. So we will be looking at opportunities to provide grants to entities in Washington, D.C., New York, and Chicago. We are, you can tell from our website, if you had a chance to look at it, we're a grant-making entity, which means we are providing grants to other 501c organizations. So see it as a business-to-business type of model. Our next part of our strategic focus further out is to start doing work in Uruguay, Brazil, and Portugal. And then even further down the line, our vision is to provide opportunities in Cuba. So that gives you a lay of the land of where we're going organizationally. I do want to share our first program that we just announced in February. This was a culmination of our grant subcommittee from the foundation working closely with the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico. What we discovered, there was a need already at the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico for what they were looking to do with their learning centers and all their capabilities from their foundation being set up in 2000 to our needs to start making our vision real, which is to start providing grants. That's what we do, is we're in the business of providing grants. So it was these two needs coming together. So I've asked the executive director of the Museo de Puerto Rico to share with us more about the grant, the program that we jointly started. So at this point, I'm going to hand over the webinar to Marta Mabel Perez. Marta Mabel?
Morning. Thank you for the opportunity, and good morning to all of you that are connected with us today. We are more than happy with the opportunity that your foundation has given us. So I want to read what we have developed with you, so I can give the other colleagues and the people who are listening and are connected through the internet how we build the proposal with you together, so they have the opportunity, and by example, maybe it will be easier for them to apply for the future grants that you're going to offer to the community. So the Darryl Chappell Foundation support young artists who have an interest in the fine arts achieve their dreams and maximize their potential to become artists. In addition, it offers resources and opportunities for young The Museo de Puerto Rico aligns with the mission and vision of the Darryl Chappell Foundation, and is why we work the new artist resident program through its Apprenticeship Fellow program. At Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico, we have the commitment to serve and represent through the art the plurality of what is to be Puerto Rican. Proof of this is the new Museo de Arte's permanent exhibition titled Puerto Rico Plural, in which the history of Puerto Rican art is reviewed through the artworks in multiple media over 13 thematic axes. Migration processes both to and from Puerto Rico have helped shape those characteristics and particularities that define and represent Puerto Ricans. The foundation of our culture relies on the union of other Santurce, the neighborhood where the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico is located, distinguishes itself as the only neighborhood in Puerto Rico founded by the freed Black slave, descendant of the sub-Saharan Africa. The African is an integral part of our culture and prevails in our daily life expressions and the way of being and doing. We know the importance of the value of art and the healthy development of society. We also know that there are many young, talented, and promising people living in vulnerable communities where they lack access to meaningful experience that give them the opportunity to be creators, to acquire new knowledge, and to discover places of environment that are beyond the immediacy and reach. As part of its artistic education, Arte de Puerto Rico seeks to promote art as a tool for empowerment and development. Young people really are the future, and that is why it's important to provide the opportunities for the social inclusion. The positive results of cultural work are more visible in communities where they are young people living in a difficult and poverty situations. New generations, despite the inequalities, are more aware of today's world, live multiculturalism, and are in constant contact with more resources of information than in the past. The minds and abilities of young people are taking from and absorbing information, so they wish for access and services and chances to grow to their fullest. Our challenge is to reduce inequality because education and art must include all members. For that, we must provide holistic learning experience that will help stimulate and enhance the creative skill in safe and approachable spaces that otherwise will be unreachable. The Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico is developing the new Educational Innovation Center that will be focused on creative processes and research in art. The dynamic educational programming will have and its central axis in the new art resident program, allowing students and public to enter into the creative process of artists. In addition, it will have new spaces designated to reach and study from kindergarten to high school, university students and adults. The Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico aspires to be the link between the art and the artistic in professionally developing their creative skills. Through this residency program, the museum will become the hub for young artists to have immersed experience in the art world. This experience will allow them to develop their potential to become artists through substantial and measurable opportunities. The new artist residency program will thus be a laboratory for innovation, the creation process, and the knowledge through the new processes that will generate artistic production. Young people want to contribute, connect with others, express and share their knowledge, experience, opinions, ideas, and creations. The Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico acts as a facilitator, opening the dialogue through the content generated by participants of this program, respecting the input of young people, active participants capable of in a symbiotic process. The young people will be actively giving shape to what museums do and modeling what they want to obtain from them. This will translate into the sense of ownership and attachment to museum as a respective living and constantly transforming spaces. The Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico has outlined a series of criteria for the selection who will serve as a resident artist at the museum. These artists will lead the group of young artists while also having the opportunity to advance his professional development. With the project, the Museo will promote the creative and research process of young artists through the Artist Residency Program. This program will choose 20 high school students and 20 university students for a into 4, having the opportunity to receive an individualized mentoring from our resident artists. Through this program, young people who have an interest in the arts will receive training and mentorship to develop their skill and advance in a case they wish to continue their training as professional in the field. At the end of this year, 40 new participants will select. After 2 years of this program and the opportunity for training, guidance and direction will be provided to 80 young people who through this program can find in art not only a tool for professional development, but also for social impact mechanism. Thanks to the sponsorship of the Darryl Chappell Foundation, we will make this happen. So we are more than excited, and how profound the program and that we have been working this with Darryl since September of last year. This takes time. I want to be to distinguish that your foundation are one that help all the people who are interested to be part of your project, that we walk this one step at a time, one beside the other. And Darryl, thank you for the opportunity to think in big and again, make it happen. So we will start the program as soon as the school open after all these things happening for the summer. So we are more than confident that we will start this program with the artists in July, and we will be receiving the students for late, maybe September, if not August, but as soon as the government and we will continue to reaching out the students and the artists.
Excellent, excellent job. Thank you, Marta, Mabel, so much for your alliance and your partnership. And I'm certain during the Q&A segment of our webinar, there will be questions, in particular as it relates to the 20 high school students and the 20 university students. We have people on the webinar who actually are from university administration, so they may have questions about how students may actually be able to participate in the upcoming class in the fall. So thank you so much. We also, one thing that Marta Mabel mentioned as well is the Darryl Chappell Foundation is providing a curator who will be coaching the artists in Puerto Rico. So we look forward to announcing who the artist is in Puerto Rico, and also announcing who the curator is that we're working with. So we look forward to that announcement and sharing that with you soon. So thank you so much. Let's now go to our panel segment of the webinar. I am pleased to introduce an esteemed panel that has been very, very helpful to the foundation over the last several months. I actually traveled to Puerto Rico in September with a board member, and we met with several individuals on the island at that time. And then over the last few weeks, I've been having a lot of video conference calls with many of the panelists. So let me introduce them to you, and then we'll get started with our panel discussion. So in no particular order, I'm going to start with ColaborativoPR. So the Colaborativo Puerto Rico is a Colaborativo has been in existence for several years, and it works predominantly and strongly in a community outside of San Juan called Loíza. We have representation from the executive director of ColaborativoPR, Leonor Garcia. Very pleased to have Leonor here with us today. The next panelist is Ann Gabino, who's the Senior Vice President for the Fundación Comunitaria. The Fundación Comunitaria has been in operations for several years. It's a well-regarded, well-represented foundation on the island, has done a huge amount of work during the resolution of the crisis from Maria all the way back before that as well. Currently working with the COVID crisis with the senior citizens and helping make sure they have enough food, and volunteerism. It's just, I've been so pleased and impressed with speaking with Marianne and her team. We met face-to-face back in September, and we were supposed to meet in person during this week and last week, but the events of the world did not allow that to happen. Regardless, we've been in contact the past couple of weeks by video conference, so very pleased to have Ann Gabino here with us as well. Another individual from the Fundación Comunitaria is Agnes Crespo. Agnes is a lead in the Economic Development Unit at Fundación Comunitaria. In particular, I'm interested in Agnes's point of view, given her background with the government on the island of Puerto Rico, and also just my own background in business for a very long time, and being able to address societal challenges, but also be able to look at it from putting numbers to it and impact. So I think Agnes is going to add tremendously to that discussion. The next panelist is Javier Hernández Acosta. Javier is a director at the Department of Business Administration at the Universidad de Sagrado Corazón, right there in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Javier, I just met this week. Thank you to Leonor, who made the connection. And quite frankly, that's how this works in many countries, but in particular, it's working that way in Puerto Rico. It's a very tight-knit community, and I very greatly appreciate having met Javier earlier this week, and his perspective and all the great work that he's done as an entrepreneur, an academic, and just tremendous amount of work. And I'm sure you'll be pleased to hear about his story as well. So I have prepared a couple of questions for the panel to address. And the first panel discussion is going to revolve around community, the sense of community, the sense of art and the place of art in Puerto Rico, and then the intersection of art and community. So that's the topic with our first panel. So with that in mind, Marianne, could you share with us from the Fundación Comunitaria point of view, this whole idea of community? I think you shared with me how you have a framework for looking at the idea of community. So could you share with us a little bit about your framework and how you see community and even the intersection of art and community? Marianne, 1 second, I have you on mute. So the power of the facilitator is, I feel like I'm God here. I can control who can speak and at what point, but the downfall is you have to remember to unmute people. So Marianne, you should be able to communicate at this time.
I am. Thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, Darryl, I want to thank you for convening us, because this is a community, right? When we convene ourselves and we listen to ourselves. So I really appreciate the time that you've taken, you and your foundation, your board, to really listen to this community, and us this morning being representatives of a segment of the community. So I really wanted to take the time to thank you for that. In a foundation, which actually we've been 35 years working with communities, we've learned that we really need to listen. We really need to listen to the community's challenges and opportunities, because they have a cumulative knowledge. They're the ones that in the wake of a crisis or not, they're the ones that are there to respond to their community, because they know how to respond. In our experience, after Maria, it was the communities who became our, as with many other foundations, became the true partners of solving, the issues that were going on, either, accessibility to food, to health, to energy, to water. So there is a collective knowledge that's going on in the community that empowers and allows for the community to take action to resolve its problem. Its intersection with the arts and our experience, we are a very creative island. So we kind of incorporate arts to whatever strategy we try to do. And that was seen after the hurricanes, where, many groups activated, through drama, through music, through graphic arts, to work on the psycho-emotional aspects of the communities, being children, being, adults, and being the youth. It happened the same thing after the earthquake. A community has been receiving a lot of support and on psycho-emotional, and it has mainly focused, not all, but it has used the arts as a way to heal, and as a way to self-expression and self-resilience for the community. So our experience has been, and we've actually, as a grant maker, as a community foundation, we have to thank our funders for allowing us in this, 2 different moments of crisis on the island, to actually support these initiatives that incorporate art to support the community. We do that, the collective knowledge and collective action frame of work. It's based on empowering and strengthening community capital, which we have defined for ourselves as, strengthening the human capital, the social capital, environmental, physical, financial, and cultural capital of the communities. And in a way, we do that by providing access to essential resources to the community. But, we need to, before we go in as a funder, we need to listen and receive feedback from the community and actually understand where those opportunities are to really take action and to really support, whatever means they understand are feasible for them to empower themselves and to strengthen themselves.
Thank you, Marianne. And that just resonates with me so much about this aspect of listening. I have been hearing from, for example, one of the program managers at ColaborativoPR in Luisa, And on a call with Leonor earlier this week, I just heard so much about actually the day-to-day life of individuals in Loíza. And for those outside of Puerto Rico who are not familiar with the island, Loíza is a community right outside of San Juan. It's historically Afro-Puerto Rican, Afro-Caribbean community, has been challenged economically, but is very cohesive and strong. And so I think just listening to the conversation with the need earlier this week for the Colaborativo provided such great insights. And so I think as we continue this discussion around community, I think that's fundamental, this aspect of listening.
I totally agree. I mean, there is so much learnings and there's so much experience going down in the community base that we tend, to leave it to the end and listen to other sectors of the community, being government, being, these other formal structures, but there is so much knowledge going down in the community base, and we need to elevate that knowledge to the other sectors.
And I like the elevate the knowledge, because as a foundation, what we consciously are aware of, that we're not coming in from the outside to help fix anything. We come in to listen and understand what the challenges are and be able to elevate those challenges and come up with solutions that are jointly designed. So I think that hits right on to the topic of listening to the community, elevate those issues, and seeing what potential solutions may be out there. What about from our other panelists? Any other comments or thoughts about community, the idea of community? And let me make sure I unmute people, because it'll be a very difficult time getting your comments without being unmuted.
No, I absolutely agree with Marianne. I really believe that the job that they have been doing is an example of how arts has to be integrated in those strategies. So definitely arts has become, always has been like kind of the glue that puts together the community. And I think that the example with the hurricane where artists became part of the first response is a great example of how the role of arts is so diverse. It doesn't have to be instrumental. The role of the arts is important by itself, but I think that one of the examples of how arts gets into other areas is through community development. And we experienced that during the earthquake, during the hurricanes, and now in a virtual model with the COVID-19 aspect.
Yeah, Javier, I think you touched on a lot of key points there. One in particular, as it relates to how when the community is traumatized, and of course these are all generalizations, but this is part of what we've heard since our data collection since September of last year. When the community there is traumatized, what might be the fallback is to use the arts, music, food to really cope with the challenges that maybe one may be confronting. So the example, I think, Leonor, that you provided with the post the actual hurricane, that certain communities were actually playing plena or bomba, some of the other music types on the island, and using that as a way to cope with what is really psychologically scarring experiences, one of limited resources, one of no water, no electricity, the cavalry is not coming to save us, and being in the midst of great despair and anxiety. However, even in the midst of that, having a community to be able to be self-sufficient and be able to survive through those experiences has been what I've heard. Any other comments from the panel? Okay, our next topic is really the arts on the island in terms of, where do we think the arts are now compared to, say, in the past. And Javier, you brought up a good example of not only just in known communities like Santurce, where also in San Juan, Puerto Rico, for those not on the island, where there's a resurgence of art and creativity, but also you brought up an example when we talked about the old, way back in the day, the old 1950s type of art collective or the Central Art Cultural Center. Could you talk a bit about today, perhaps, how this whole Central Art Center is being used as a point of trying to resurface the arts on the island?
Yeah, I think that one of the main issues in this island is that geographically we're very small, but for some reason psychologically we are like a continent, and sometimes mobility is not as easy as people would think in such a small island. So it's also very important to consider how decentralization of cultural work and cultural participation is another important aspects that we have to address. And we were discussing that in the 50s, the structure of cultural centers in the municipalities were a very important model to guarantee that people can create artwork and people can participate in cultural life. So I think that with time, that structure has not evolved as it should be. And I think we have to put attention of what are those cultural, formal or informal cultural centers that are in the municipalities in order to promote decentralization and a better distribution, of cultural work going beyond the metro area to regions, in the center, in the southeast that we have talked in the west. So I think we have to rethink who are those key stakeholders around the island and start collaborating more with them in order for the artwork of the work of artists sometimes is too, it's reaching a very narrow audience in the metro area. We are 3.3 million Puerto Ricans in the island, citizens in the island, 5.5 in the States. So we have to start looking beyond the immediacy of our local community or city. And I think that cultural centers, at least the concept of cultural centers, could be a great project that could evolve to address that issue of decentralization and diversity.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think one key point, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Yes, and also it's important to add what Javier has said is that it's not only work, besides working with the community, but also we have to work clearly and to identify how we're going to work out with the municipalities and the initiative. I am provoking a meeting for leaders in Puerto Rico tomorrow. So we start doing a strategic plan of how to save the culture in Puerto Rico, because every time we have an emergency in the island, what people think most of the time is on the community directly and the necessities that they have. That is the most important, the health and the security for the community. But where do you put the soul? So the health of the Puerto Ricans are very important. And the government right now, during the hurricane, during the earthquake, and right now, they don't think about culture. They don't think about how the institutions are going to take care of them and how we're going to provide that service to the community, as Javier says in the 50s, and right now, we need it the most because they do many emergency economic packages, but culture is not included. And we are, I don't know, maybe on the bullet number 10, 15, 20, I don't know, but we have to get together and to communicate how art is so important for the community and the real essence of it. Remember when the crises are here and when the crisis came up, what they look of are for creative people to get solutions. So it's not only to give an access to people to how to teach people how to be creative to resolve the problems and how we have to make an economic that we are construct over what we have done. So creativity goes more deeply in society, not just drawing, not just only keeping up collections, but how to resolve problems. So that's the key that we needed, and maybe that's what we can speak about how to work with communities, because when they were speaking about how art is so important to community, is how to teach them to make solutions. And artists are survivals through all their life. They never have money. They never have budget. And they have to resolve their problem with creativity. So I understand the most important part here is so important in all their careers, in all the professions, and also how to resolve problems, even in science. So creativity is the most important, and it's part of culture, and it's part of the service that we give to all the people, not only in Puerto Rico, in the Caribbean, Latin America, and around the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, sorry, Agnes, were you going to say something?
Yeah, in the same line, it's precisely, that's the point. Cultural projects and cultural entrepreneurs, artists are not, they're seeing like, when we have time, that's entertainment, that's simply a luxury. They've not seen like they contribute to the economy. And if any other entrepreneur is fighting, you know, in this economic downturn, they are also. So we don't see that the artists as it is. They contribute to the economy. They have to be attended as it is.
So Agnes, to that point, perhaps you could talk a little bit about your work in looking at the intersection of creativity and entrepreneurship. Could you spend a little time sharing that with our audience?
Yes, in the Puerto Rico Community Foundation, we have been advocating for years for different policies that recognize that creative industries are an economic sector as well as others. As Marta Mabel said, it's like any scientist, any lawyer, any CPA, they contribute to the economy. They need to be attended as well. We have an opportunity to lead a significant transformation. As you were saying, like providing technical assistance to this sector, and like promoting that we have more galleries, more exhibitions. We have to create tailor-made technical assistance for this sector.
You know, I think that, go right ahead.
Just to give you also some numbers in terms of budgeting, and knowing that many arts organizations here in Puerto Rico rely on government funding. From 2015 to 2019, the art funding from 8 government agencies declined 19%, and this was after significant budget cuts, even before 2015. So definitely the arts organization, as my other colleagues' panels, they're not seen as essential component for the economic development. So the first budget cuts go to the arts organization. But then when crises come, the arts organizations are one of the first that are out there trying to help the community. And
So Leonor, you brought up the disconnect and you showed it in numbers, which is quite powerful and illustrative that this is a disconnect between, we know the creative power of the artists and what they can do in the midst of the crisis. We already talked about that, the ability to sustain a community, the ability to address some of the trauma that someone may have gone through, and how the arts help people to really survive. However, there may not be at least government funding to continue these efforts. It's not prioritized. I do wonder then the role of nonprofits like ourselves in this case, and the impact that we can have. So that leads us to our next part of our panel discussion. And it is, how might we design an actual program to address the needs of the Puerto Rican community, simultaneously fulfilling the mission of the Darryl Chappell Foundation. going back to those 7 board members that I mentioned that I have. By design, I created a board, and they're serving a strong role to keep me honest and aligned to our mission. So we look for how can we have both meeting the needs of the Puerto Rican community and also fulfilling the vision, the mission and the vision of the Darryl Chappell Foundation. That's the challenge here. Before we open for discussion for this last part of the panel discussion, before we open it for Q&A, I will share to Marta Mabel's point, when we co-designed the fellowship program that's going to start in July at the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico, it was a process, and it was a good process. It was a rigorous process. From beginning to end, it took 75 days of working together, back and forth, fine-tuning, seeking clarity, and we got there. And so the point is, it does take time, and this webinar is just another step along the path. And our intention is to continue this. By after this webinar, eventually I will be able to travel. Eventually I will be back in Puerto Rico. And the intention is to take what happens here as another stepping stone to launching another program in Puerto Rico within a short period of time. So with that said, the emphasis on short period of time, how might we design a program to meet the needs of the Puerto Rican community and also the needs of the requirements of the foundation? What might that look like? How do we go about, and what does that look like in terms of a design perspective?
Darryl, I want to provoke and continue with your question, and is that most of the organization and your foundation is so important and so different compared to other foundations in Puerto Rico, that instead of giving guidelines of what they need and how we can ally with them, and it's important to people understand that with you, we make the alignment together and you fulfill a need that the institution has. So you don't have to or decide, so you only have all the organization and all the programs that they plan to do with you is to talk to you, to have that first talk and to tell what they need and then start working from their needs. And I am sure that many institutions, cultural institutions in Puerto Rico and foundations, we have needs, not only to do the mission of another foundation. We can align them, but the important thing about your foundation is that you give the opportunity to be creative and to fulfill the need that we have. So what I propose to all the colleagues that are in the panel, maybe to explain to you in one sentence or two their needs, and from there, I am sure you can continue with the second and third phase of your program of supporting culture.
Yeah, Marta Mabel, that's an excellent point. And let's start with Leonor. I think, Leonor, one thing that you mentioned is the importance of a grant that would be ongoing for at least a couple of years, if not 3 or 4 years. And another thing you mentioned that really resonated with me was the importance of that showing commitment to the community. I think one thing I heard from your organization is that the community may not necessarily feel a level of trust. So trust is earned, as my parents would say. And so I think there's a lot of truth to that. So Leonora, perhaps you could share a little bit about some of the importance of that you shared with what the next program would look like in terms of even timing, commitment, building the commitment from the community and trust.
Yes. From our experience working in Colaborativo, like even us, like we were from Puerto Rico, we were funders, we began this program, funders from Puerto Rico. It took us a while. We went to the community in Loíza and we first learned about other nonprofits that were there already in Loíza. We had conversations with the schools that were that we're working with them right now. But it took us, I mean, just as you're doing a different way, it took us a while just to let the community and the schools know why we were there, why we wanted to be there. We also wanted to learn what their needs were. It's not that we were coming in as, you know, we know all the answers to help you out, especially for our program, which is helping students from high school get into post-secondary schools. So but going back in terms of knowing the community and learning about their needs has been essential. And as you mentioned earlier in the panel, when Maria came, it was phenomenal how without any communication or, you know, like, you know, no water, no electricity or anything, we went back to how communication was in the old time. We prepared flyers, we went door to door to ask the students to meet us at a place to see how they're doing. And we had more than 80% of these students meet us there. So that was just an example of, I think we achieved that just because we had worked so much on that community and with them. So, and one of the things also that some of the schools have told us is that they appreciate that we have been there for more than 2 or 3 years, that many times they get programs or projects. They come there, they let them know what they're going to be doing. They're there for a year or so, and then they leave. So we have received input from the schools that they appreciate that first we went there and try to understand their needs, and that we're still there. So yes, definitely in terms of what your foundation is thinking, I would definitely say a program 2 years, best 3 or 4 years. And another thing that we have discussed is that anything that is out of the metropolitan area, like many of the investments are in this area. So anything outside of San Juan, Caguas, Guaynabo, what we call the metropolitan area would be great, because there are many organizations there that many people don't know that they're doing a great job. So those 3 things, definitely what we talked about, get to know the community, what their needs are, try to be there for more than 2, 3, or 4 years, and do it outside of the metropolitan area. Get to know all organizations outside the metropolitan area.
Yeah, thank you for that so much, Leonora, and I will be taking you up on your offer and your team to give me a tour of Louisa when I get to Puerto Rico. So thank you for that offer. Another thing before we go to Marianne, I know has a comment as well, is Colaborativo has also started surveying their students using technology like WhatsApp to figure out what their needs are. And so I think that also provides a level of going well above and beyond what the Colaborativo was doing. And it even gives the community more trust. So congratulations on being creative and in surveying the students in the midst of the current crisis. So that shows great innovation and leadership. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Marianne, I think you had a comment?
Yes, Darryl. This is an idea. This is probably more far to fetch and more complicated. But as we were listening to Leonor's statistics initially, we need to be a part. We need to leave the government dependence and be more independent. So one of the things that I think that you can help us in the island do, and probably Convene, is more funders focusing on endowment funds for cultural and arts institution in Puerto Rico, especially the nonprofits. I remember a couple of years back, I went to the Cleveland Art Museum, and it was fascinating just to be there and listen how their founding fathers thought on endowing such an institution. We definitely don't have that type of founding fathers in Puerto Rico based on, you know, their potential on their wealth. But we can elevate Puerto Rico's profile in the US and Puerto Rico's culture and arts opportunities on the island, and try to build endowments, or at least identify accessible funding for arts institutions to have their own endowment. I mean, I know that the Puerto Rico Art Museum has an endowment, but you know, how can it continue to strengthen it? Conservatory also has an endowment. How can we strengthen that so when budget cuts come from the government, you know, they don't have to suffer that much because they're self-sustainable? How can we allow for small nonprofits that are actually community-based, have their own endowments? Those are very, they don't have to be as big as a museum or a conservatory of music, but still it would give them long-term self-sustainability. Because what we need to think and what we need to figure out is how to maintain these structures up, so that they can actually uplift that community, not only in the terms of the crisis, but to maintain a culture, you know, alive. So how can your institution allow or convene other arts and culture funders to focus on endowments for, you know, either the big institutions or the small institutions, but just to have a self-sustainable, you know, future?
You know, Marianne, you touched on something that's at the heart of what we're doing right now as well, and that's this whole aspect of endowment. So thank you for bringing that up, because the reality is, you know, the Darryl Chappell Foundation is also a startup. So we started this up, and you know, we have to endow it as well. And I think you hit on something that's key. One of our core values, and you'll see them all on our website, one of the core values is self-sufficiency, that we believe in creating this endowment ourselves. And then I think what you bring to the table is not thinking only for the foundation, but also how do we share that expertise of building this foundation? So I think of organizations on the mainland like Network for Good, and their focus in webinars and training on endowments. I think of all the other foundation organizations that focus on that and the techniques and the training, but also making it, customize it, correct, for the unique circumstances of Puerto Rico. I think that's important. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. I do agree with you. I think that's something in our longer term strategy that we will be able to offer as we build our own endowment. So that's critical. Javier, I wanted to come to you. I know that you yourself have mentioned getting outside of, like Leonor says, the municipality in San Juan. And I think you brought to my attention, I had not heard about this whole idea of the poverty corridor in the Guayama area. So my question would be, you know, what opportunities may exist there? What does a program look like there? I think the broader question is, how might we design a program in these other parts of the island that goes back to some of the earlier discussions in the webinar, that are not necessarily at the museum, where certain parts of the community may not have access or interest for whatever reason, but are more targeted to outside of the main metropolitan areas. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah.
For example, I think that we have to start looking for ways on translating good practices into new territories. For example, what Leonor and the Colaborativo is doing in Loíza, for example, there's learnings there. There are learnings that can be translated into other regions. I mentioned the southeast area because is an area that, you know, normally is under the radar, and probably that's why some people call it the poverty corridor, because, you know, probably it's not in the way of main cities. So when you have the metro, the south, the west. So probably if you're in the middle of this, you get attention. But the southeast, it seems to be an area that needs more attention from us. So I believe that we have to look for ways into translating good practices and experiences at things that have gone on in Loíza. For example, projects that have been done by the Puerto Rico Community Foundation, by the museums, all of them that has community outreach projects. So I think it's a matter of translating good practices. So you have the key players here. And for example, we have the experience of Sagrado Corazón, which is the university where I working in the immediate community of Santurce, which is another area that is very interesting because it has the socioeconomic diversity and cultural diversity that if you can manage to do change in that area, some of those learnings can be translated into other areas. So I think it's a matter of how we support strategies beyond projects or programs. So all of the people in this panel, they have strategies. They have long-term strategies for their initiatives. So any support to these initiatives will go beyond a simple program and will turn into a long-term strategy. So I think we have great examples. We have the people, we have the creative talent. It's a matter of supporting and putting the resources in the people who are already doing things. Because, you know, one of the things I love about this country is that people provide solutions all the time. So solutions are there. It's a matter of getting the resources to support what is already started.
Yeah, Javier, you touched on a lot there. And I think another thing, your expertise in actually offering these aspiring artists with professional skills as well, how to do bookkeeping, how to manage a budget. I think we don't want to lose sight of those day-to-day skills and professionalism as well. So I think in terms of another program, I think there's some add-ons that we can look into as well.
It's important when we talk about the institution and the endowments and about outreach, that sometimes many foundations, like I said before, they want us to design new programs. It's important that the foundation asks us, what do you have and what do you need funding? Because we have employees and we have a staff, and suddenly we have to hire a new coordinator to run the program that another foundation is bringing to the institution. So when we need endowment and with all our institution, what we need is to pay our utilities and the main things that to keep going. So sometimes we do a parallel running, the everyday and then the new programs that we have to add. I am with Javier that we need to connect with each other and to push strategies together. Because, for example, the Museo de Arte Puerto Rico has an outreach program. We used to visit all the schools around the year. We don't do it more frequently now because of the cuts of the funding. That position was closed. So now with the same staff that I have to divide the time being at the museum and getting outreach to the museum. So it's the same employee doing 2 things at the same time, sometimes 3 things at the same time. So sometimes it's not our services that we are giving to the community, and that we have to put all the resources together. And it's very complicated when sometimes you have to sacrifice programming to pay utilities. And that is what is happening in Puerto Rico. All the organization, we need to pay our bills. And even though you put all the strategies out and all your creativity, you need funding to come in. For example, we are worried right now that we are not like, as a museum and all the museums around the world, we close our doors. We are doing all the online activities that you can imagine because we know how to do that. We have done it for decades. I mean, since the first time Facebook came up. But how are we going to pay our bills if we cannot do activities and we cannot do income to the museum? Government, companies, everybody have to understand that the organization, we need cash, we need to pay our payroll, and we need to pay our utilities. We can be creative in this moment, and we can do a lot of programs to sustain that everybody is in their houses. But what we really need is that they knock our door and they say, okay, what do you need the grant for? And help us. Not to create another program when we are closed and we don't get income, and then to hire somebody to do the project, and then the fundings get in and out, and accountability, like Javier says. We don't need programs that the money come in and out. We need programs that help us to keep going, to pay all the things that are expensive at any institution.
Wow, Marta, maybe you said a lot there, and I think it's like a moment of truth when it comes to what's happening across the world with many art institutions and museums and galleries and and for artists as well. So I heard you loud and clear, and thank you for bringing that to the forefront. I mean, it's a real challenge economically, some real challenges. Meanwhile, in the midst of the challenge, as a foundation, we continue to move forward. And I just thank all of you for your comments and your thoughts. And this, like I mentioned, doesn't stop here. We will continue to have these discussions via video and eventually in person over coffee. So I look forward to that day where we can actually share coffee. So before I open it up to the folks on the line, which we have a lot of people out there, I did want to say thank you to first the panelists. If I were there in person, you would have fabulous gifts and prizes that I would give to you right now. So imagine this gift. Here you go, Marianne. You're on my upper left here. So thank you so much. Agnes, thank you for your insights. Phenomenal. Leonor, oh my goodness, you're my best friend now. You're just great. Javier, I just can't wait to get to know you better. And then Marta, Mabel, what can I say? I mean, we have an alliance going, and even though these are the darkest of days, I'm just confident that we'll get through this. So thank you for your insights, your enthusiasm, your support, and I'm looking forward to our continued alliance. So thank you all. So I see hands are being raised already. So people on the phone, you probably know the process. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm going to go to you. I'm going to try to unmute your phone so that you can ask your question. Please, because of the sake of time, just give us your name and your question, or if you have a statement for us to consider, that would be great. So we'll try this out. Here we go. Jorge Flynn, your line is unmuted.
Perfect, I'm here. You listening?
Yes,
you
we can hear you.
Yeah. Perfect.
Thanks
Hi,
for
how
joining.
are you all? Thanks.
Hi, Jorge.
For the opportunity. Hi, how are you, Javier? How are you, Mabel?
Great.
Okay. Hi, how are you? Basically, I have, obviously, most of you know me. What I've been doing the last 15 years in terms of developing these sustainable careers, in terms of empowering young musicians, although, meaning in terms of at their early stages, and also in the higher institutional level. I have one question, couple of questions. Have anybody have gathered and confirmed any database of artists in all genres, and also skills of an inventory skills for what they can perform and execute as a sustainable business model?
For visual artists at Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico, we have a database of visual artists. We know exactly where they are. As you know, I founded and established the Artist Assistance Program, PROA, Programa Asistencia Artista. So we really know how they are, and we gave many of the skills to build up their career. We don't share their information because it's private, but you can find, at least in the artist directory at the website of the museum, 300 names of the artists. We can share their names, but not their contacts. But yes, we do, and we not only work through in San Juan, like we visit the whole island all around, and we know exactly where they are and how they are doing. So at the Museo, we are very responsible to be in contact with the visual artists of Puerto Rico.
Jorge, thank you for your question. Greatly appreciate it. Javier, go on.
I just want to make a comment because Jorge's statement is very important. We at Inversión Cultural, we're starting a project on statistics and showing actual data from the creative sector, and we're going to publish something in the next few weeks. But using census data, the estimate for 2017 approximately, which is the last available set of data, you have close to 10,000 creatives working full-time in the island, where their main income is from the creative activity, artists, designers, and close to 25,000 people working in the creative industries. So if you take that 10,000, which is people whose main income is from the arts and creative activity, you can expect, you know, the double, more than the double that people that earn, you know, as a secondary income. So it is very important to identify who are these people, where they are, what they're doing, and what are their challenges. So I just want to address that Jorge's statement is very important. We have statistical data, estimation based on Puerto Rico Community Survey from the census, but we don't know exactly beyond Marta Mabel's database from the visual arts and maybe some efforts in some specific sectors. We need a lot to do in order to understand who these people are, what they can do, and how can we support them in order to develop those sustainable business models.
The Museo published a book about the study of the condition of the visual artists in Puerto Rico, so you can get it. But it is a little more complicated than that, and maybe Javier knows it. For visual artists, for musicians, for performers, for many artists, to have their information, that means that they have to register, and it's very complicated because it's very informal. The government does not understand our career and our expertise. I know in music is a different ballgame than in the visual artist, but for example, we have to train the government. If they go to an artist that doesn't, for example, have sell artwork for 10 years, and he has an inventory, I mean, do we have to pay for over our inventory? It's very complicated. So as Javier says, we to help the artist and to go to the government and to explain exactly the way it works, because sometimes people think that artists are part-timers because we have the second job. It's not the first job. The first job is our career. The second job is to be a teacher, a director of a museum, for example. But we are visual artists and we need to do our work on the weekends or on the holiday. So in that way, people are misunderstood and the government, they don't understand. So yes, we need to do that. And I am more than willing to continue working with Javier and Universidad del Sagrado Corazón, because we need that name, but we need to train our artists. And that is an individual decision of them, if they want to go and register or not. So it's a little more deep than just putting. That's why I start telling you that we do not share their information, because it's very private and it's a little dense. For example, I have received calls of people telling that they know that I have all the names of the visual artists in Puerto Rico, so they can ask them for a loan that they have a debt, and they want their contact. And they say, Marta, Mabel, do you have the contact of this artist? I say, for what? Because they have dues. And I say, no, we don't. We don't give information off of the artist. So it's a little complicated helping our artists. And
Mabel, thank you so much. We're having several hands raised, so let's keep moving. Thank you. Before I go to my next person who raised their hand, Andrea Gonzalez, I do want to continue to thank people. So another person I want to thank who's been a huge partner is Lourdes Miranda and the Miranda Foundation. So Lourdes, thank you for all your help. Also want to thank Marta Moreno Vega, who I continue to partner with, who's done a lot of work there on the island and has a lot of great ideas of how we can make a difference on the ground. So thank you, Dr. Marta Moreno Vega. Also, Maria Elba Torres, who's at the Universidad de Puerto Rico. Thank you to you in your broad perspective on what I call the continuum and being able to look at this whole idea of self-sustaining artists as well. So once they are an artist, how do they eventually be productive and make it a commercial enterprise and actually make money from it versus having to have 4 or 5 jobs just to survive? So Maria Elba Torres, thank you for that perspective. I'll continue to thank folks as we go along. Okay, so I'm gonna now open the line up to Adrian Gonzalez.
Yes, good morning. This is Adrian Gonzalez. Thank you all for giving us the opportunity. Here in New York, I've met Darryl through a friend of mine, and I am of Puerto Rican, Cuban ancestry. I was just recently in Puerto Rico about a month ago, and I keep close ties with my family out there, so I'm quite aware of what's going on. I just wanted to bring up a couple of points that I think would be something worth thinking about. And that is, my background is in financial services management consulting, as well as your bank. Comes to mind with the foundation and the art, trying to get the private sector to partner with major corporations such as JP Morgan, and most of the large corporations have a philanthropy division, and they usually allocate money to various arts programs. And I've met several people throughout the years, both at JP Morgan and a couple of the other companies. I know Goya has one. Siemens Healthineers, which is a huge German conglomerate, also has a philanthropy division that focuses with partnering with a lot of the local not-for-profit arts programs. So that's something to think about in terms of how to best partner with these corporations and get them to invest in what you guys are trying to do. And then the other thing that comes to mind is also creating a data bank. And with that data bank, you would have an inventory of all the organizations in the island that in some way, shape, or form help communities. So I know there's 78 municipalities in Puerto Rico. Each one of those municipalities have some sort of small arts program. Well, getting those companies, those organizations to all kind of partner and try to create maybe a sense of partnership, fostering or promoting events throughout the island and throughout the year. And one of the other thing that also comes to mind is best practices. I know Javier had spoken about that. And I think also creating a repository where you keep all the best practices, what has worked, for example, for the Southwest region versus what doesn't work for the Northeast versus what works in the Southeast. So keeping a best practices inventory, a repository, and then sharing that information with the various communities would be very helpful. So yeah, that was my, oh, and then the last thing was also possibly to promote creating sort of a traveling theater where you're not just based out of one location, but you take whatever you're showcasing in terms of an exhibit, an artist, and you kind of travel throughout the island and you promote that way. It's like that, it's equitable in that every community has the opportunity to see. So for example, people that have limited mobility because they don't have the cars or more so the cars, to get from point A to B have the same opportunity as those living in the metro area to see, the various art programs. So basically that's it. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, Adrian. Very, very insightful, and particularly as it relates to the corporations. My whole career has been in corporate America. It'll be interesting to see as events continue to evolve over the next few weeks and months, what happens with many of the programs that have been hit already from the arts perspective. Also interesting perspective in terms of the, something that I've heard from other artists in particular is the loss of an archive, and so not really having some documentation of things that have been done. So the importance of being able to have some great documentation, archives, records retention, and sharing of best practices. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Darryl?
Yes.
Very quickly, I don't want to take much time, but to reply to one of the things mentioned was an inventory of the organizations here in Puerto Rico. Right now, local foundation, Titin Foundation, has been working on a project that is called sinfinespr.org. It's actually right now you can go to it, and it's doing exactly that. Is compiling all the nonprofits here in Puerto Rico, and you can go through them through the municipality, or if it's the arts or health. And so that's an ongoing project. Been working at it for quite a while, but because that's something that we we had been missing here in Puerto Rico, which was like a platform where anyone in the world could find nonprofits in Puerto Rico, what they were doing, where within the island they're at. So I just wanted to let everyone know that it's Sinfines, SINFINESPR.org. And lastly, I don't want to take much time, but we did talk about some of the challenges about nonprofits here with the federal extension, the 501c3. So, I mean, we know that there are foundations or maybe corporations out there that might be willing to donate here, but sometimes we have that barrier.
Thank you, Leonor. Agnes, did you have a comment?
Yeah, definitely. But we have to look further. That inventory, it needs to be defined, you know, the design sector, the art sector, the creative services sector, and what are their economic potential, their growth opportunities, high innovation potential, what are scalable projects. Like we were talking about Santurce, we have so much infrastructure, you know, lying there. We need to, you know, like match, you know, there's so many organizations or dance companies that need a venue and they don't have it. So we need to do that. Inventory needs to be organized that way, you know, venues, project organized, and the economic potential, and then explain, of course, the advocacy, you know, with the government it has to be, you know, forever. We've done it in the past. Javier has been part of that, and the Act 173 was created, was enacted, but we need to do more. We need to explain to them that they provide economic return, they create jobs. So we have, you know, to promote them. It's urgent.
Thank you, Agnes. As I continue to thank people, another group of folks I want to thank is Dr. Jose Caraballo Cuelto. Sorry if I'm not saying the names correctly. Doctor was very helpful in providing some data from an economist perspective. So thank you in terms of as we look at which communities in Puerto Rico we may want to focus with our next program. I also would like to thank the development director at the Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico, Mena Perez. Mena is a long-term, I would say, friend. And so Mena, I don't know if you're on the call, but thank you for everything you've done. I wanted to recognize you. From the Museum of Art Contemporáneo in Puerto Rico, Miriam Ramirez and Carolina Cortez, the board treasurer, and I met with both of them last September, and they actually were very helpful in learning what's going on in Santurce. So I really, really valued that discussion with both. And actually, Carolina may have a comment to make. Carolina, not to put you on the spot, but I know you may have something to share as well. If not, you can just say, I made it up, and you can say, you have nothing to share. Okay, maybe she has nothing to share. One thing she did mention now was there's an opportunity for getting together. The president of the Puerto Rico Museum Association, and sharing information on more than 100 museums located around the island. So I think that goes back to the point about that Adrian started with his comments about sharing across the island, and then the urgency that Agnes mentioned as well.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, this is Marian Ramirez. I don't know what happened with the connection, because I see that it seems that my name now is Carolina Cortez, which is my colleague. But thank you, Darryl, for arranging this. And I am the president of the Puerto Rico Museum Association, and we have been working these last few days with a survey to gather information on the more than 100 museums around the island: history, museum, archaeological museums, art museums, etc. And basically to be able to gather information as to the economic impact our institutions have been going through to this new challenge that we're facing with the COVID-19. I also would like to say that besides that, and I will gladly be able to share that information with you. The deadline is this next Wednesday. Besides that, you know, when we met last year, I was able to share with you, you know, the MAC in the Barrio program that we have been running for the past 6 years, which I also think is a good model as to, you know, an outreach program and how to better serve communities, but also how to better serve the artists. This is a program that is comprised of educational and cultural initiatives, but also a commission artworks project, which basically provides artists, you know, with the funding to do research and to create artworks that are the result, you know, of their engagement with the communities. And when we think of communities, this program already has a permanent residence in 25 different communities for the past 6 years, as I mentioned, in San Juan, Guaynabo, Ponce. Ponce we recently added due to the earthquake situation, Loíza, and Cataño. So I think that, as Leonor mentioned before, it is key, you know, this ongoing relationship with communities for them to be able to trust, you know, the product that you are trying to present them, to share with them, and also hearing them out, you know, to design these different experiences. The museum also is very, I guess, strong and also always looking into not only communities that you would define geographically, but also communities of interest. So I think that's also something very important to keep in mind, that there are many vulnerable communities that are being underserved. So I can share with you this information and with the rest of the group if you're interested. Last year, we also had a very good discussion at the museum with different artist groups and organizations that we can share. And I know that Javier was a part also of that, the meeting that was organized together with the Mellon Foundation. I know that there was some good data that was gathered that day that we could also share with you. And I look forward, you know, to continue, you know, our discussions into seeing how we could contribute, you know, to what you are planning on doing here in Puerto Rico. Another thing that I think that is very important that was mentioned, and that is something that could make a great deal of difference to our organizations and cultural institutions, is the endowment that Ann Gabino mentioned, because as also as it has been said, you know, our institutions, for example, our museum has received more than 50% budget cuts during the last 5 years. So I guess that any initiative that would help us out to sustain ourselves would be great. You know, the problem that we have here is that you know, most of the funding that we receive through foundations are for specific programs, but not funding to be used, you know, to pay for payroll or to pay utilities. And that is something, you know, that is also very important, you know, to keep us going. So again, thank you for arranging this, and I hope that we can meet soon again. And any information that I can, you know, share with you as you know, from the museum, or either from the Puerto Rico Museum Association, or from the One Voice movement, which also is a coalition of non-for-profit organizations, around 140 non-profit organizations located around the island, I will be glad to do so.
Thank you, Marianne Ramirez. I really appreciate your voice right now. And you were great hosts, you and Carolina, back in September. You provided us with a couple of books that, quite frankly, I cherish. They're right here on my bookshelf about the community, about your work at the museum. I also thank you for bringing up this whole reality of what we call restricted funding. I'm on 2 other nonprofit boards, and we realize how challenging it is when there is this funding that's restricted. So I am hearing this whole theme of the importance of the endowment again. Yes, actually, definitely please share with me the information that you mentioned. I'll be certain to share it with members of this, the panelists here, if that works best for everyone, if they don't already have it. Thank you for mentioning the One Voice movement and the coalition there. And I do think with regard to Mac and the Barrio, I do think there's some infrastructure that is already in place that resonates closely with our mission for our foundation. So I do look forward to a continued discussion with you and your team. And thank you for joining the webinar today. So I know we're over time, but I do see there's a lot of folks still out there. So I do want to offer folks to continue to raise questions. We'll keep going as long as the panelists are available. Other thank yous I want to provide to the Center for New Economy. Thank you to Deepak Lamba Nieves, who graciously volunteered their space for this, this Art and Community Convene, which was going to be held in downtown San Juan today. It just didn't happen that way. So it worked out. We're now all together on webinar. I also want to thank Enid Quiles for her time that she spent this week with Leonor and I on Colaborativo. She provided me with phenomenal insights on the community there in Louisa. So I wanted to publicly thank her as well. Let's see, I have another question on the line here. Let's see. Okay, Marina, your line is open. Marina, you have to unmute your microphone. And sometimes the name may be different because if your peer sent you the link, you're going to have the name of the person who signed up. So do not be alarmed if your name is somebody else's name. That was just because you got a link that someone sent you. Looks like Marina Reyes, your line is, let me make sure you're unmuted.
Hello?
Yes, there you go, perfect.
Oh, hi.
Good morning, good afternoon. This afternoon here.
Yeah, where are you? Well, thank you for the opportunity to share some of the work that we do. Marina, for those of you who don't know me, I'm a curator at the Museo de Arte Contemporáneo de Puerto Rico. So just here, I've been to a couple of the other convenings that have been organized here, both with American foundations and with local foundations. So I guess that I would be kind of repeating a little bit what Marianne just said. We're always very grateful to receive funds and to develop programs that are specific to the kind of projects that we're already interested in the museum. And unrestricted funds are always very, very welcome because, I mean, we need to have a museum in order to do all the work that a museum does. And from my part on the curatorial side, I will be working with a couple of very interesting initiatives having to do with, I mean, not only with Mac en el Barrio and community initiatives, like art in the community, but also some other exhibitions in the near future, especially particularly one that is also going to be about Afro-Puerto Ricans or the, how can I say this? How the environment is also affected by, well, actually, let me go back. It's like regenerative practices in art practice. So for example, like artists working with natural materials, natural fibers, but it's also a broad range. It's not only about the materials, it's also about how they are approaching changing our lifestyles and the way that we consume what we consume, from food to artistic materials, or even like how we conceive of forest law and environmental law and all these other issues that are so present to us right now, because this is the situation that we're in right now is also a consequence of how we're affecting our environment and how we relate to nature. So we'll be working with artists and the community, both inside and outside the museum walls.
Excellent. Thank you, Marina. You actually introduced this whole topic of environmental, the issue of the environment overall, which is obviously a big topic for many nonprofits. And I know a lot of work is going into that. You also mentioned, echoed again, this whole idea of this importance of restricted funding. So thank you for bringing that to the forefront as well, because the reality is, and of course, the foundation has a board, so we'll have to discuss this during our next board meeting, which is coming up in May. But what I'm hearing is there could be this reality, and Marta, Mabel, you kind of touched on it a little bit more indirectly, but programs are nice, but we may just need some unrestricted funding in the interim. So, I mean, I don't want to jump to solutions. However, that's one thing I'm taking away from this webinar as well. So let me see what other questions are out there on the phone. Meanwhile, more thank yous. I want to thank Mara Cruz Rivera Clemente at COPI, if I'm saying that pronounced correctly, in Piñones. So they were very helpful in providing some background on what they're doing in the community. I look forward to continuing to work with COPI and team in the coming weeks as we have discussions on what a program may look like. So thank you to Maricruz Rivera Clemente as well.
Darryl, on the chat, we have Kimberly Figueroa Calderon, and she's asking if there are foundations that funds cultural process that besides visual arts, and yes, we do, we have plenty of them. If you Google them up, you will find out, for example, Fundación Ángel Ramos is a foundation that works with education and also music and theater and all, and plenty of them like Fundación Flamboyant, that they have the funds for the arts, for that the Mirandas came, and as you remember, they did the Hamilton function, so they help all the cultural institutions right now in Puerto Rico, from Agua Soriceleno to Museo de Arte de Puerto Rico. So yes, we do have plenty of them. If you need any help, you just email us through Darryl and share your contact, and we are more than willing to share that with you.
Thank you, Martha, Mabel. And Kimberly, I unmuted your line just in case you had a follow-up question. If not, I will put you back on mute.
Yeah, thank you for answering my question. I was just asking because we are part of Colectivo ILE. We are an anti-racist organization here in Puerto Rico since 1992. The thing is that we in Colectivo ILE do more like workshops and experiences through different things, but one of them is the arts. But I was thinking about some groups of theater, like Sorgen, is Negros al revés, like backwards. And they are a group of Black artists that makes plays around this topic about being Black in Puerto Rico and the colony, and I was thinking about them. So, but thank you. I will do what you recommend, and I will send an email after we finish. So thank you for the answer.
And also contact Maria Elba Torres.
Yes, I know her.
Kimberly,
Is
thank
the
you for
one
the
who
question.
keep
And,
every one of us together.
I'm sorry about my connection. I didn't understand the last thing you said.
Me?
Yeah.
Maria Elba Torres. Contact
Yes.
her, and she's the connection, and she's very deep on the theme, and she can help you to connect with all of us. She's a professor at the University of Puerto Rico. Darryl can share her contact with you.
Yes, I know her. I've been in a lot of activities with her, so I'm gonna ask her. Thank you.
You look.
and Kimberly, I would like to follow up with you as well, if you don't mind, more about your organization, Colectivo ILE. You definitely were, your organization was on my list, so I have not had a chance to, I believe, speak directly with anyone from your organization. So based on our mission and our vision, some of the work I think your organization is doing is of interest to the foundation.
Yeah, we have been doing work here and out of Puerto Rico since 1992 towards the healthy racial identity as Puerto Ricans, but also as an Afro-descendant. And one of the major interests that we have is to people recognize that, yes, we are mixed, but part of that mix is being Black and being proud of that. Mm-hmm. And our latest project is the census, because back in 2000, Puerto Ricans marked themselves as white without any other race in 80% of the population. And only 10% of us are Black, apparently. But when you go out to the street, that's not what you see. And 10 years later, the numbers changes. I think it was 76 white and 12% Black people here in Puerto Rico. So there's not too much different in that. So now we're having a campaign asking people to mark themselves as Afro-descendants, because a lot of people doesn't know for what is the census. What's the benefits of putting these statistics right. So that's our latest project, but also we have a project that is called Africa en mi piel, Africa en mi ser, Africa on my skin, African on my being. And we, through that, made a lot of processes, workshops, experiences towards healthy racial identity, as I told you. And part of them, it's through knowing our ancestors. But knowing our ancestors as the queens and the kings and the warriors they were. Because when you go to school here in Puerto Rico, a lot of our kids learn that the Black people in Puerto Rico started just being slaves. And if you give that story to the kids, they don't want to be Black because they don't want to be slaves, So the thing is that part of that process is through the history, but also through the fabrics, the African fabrics, also through the corporal movement, and the exposition to all other our arts from Africa, and the things that we heritage as the dances and the way we cook and all that stuff.
Well, thank you, Kimberly, for sharing that. And I think you touched on many topics I've heard over the last, since September, in collecting information for the foundation, the role of dance, music, food, self-identity. And so all these topics are of great interest of the foundation. In particular, if you look at our board of directors, I think you'll find tenured professors who have tackled these topics over several years. So I think, again, we have great interest in what you're discussing. Okay, so let's take the last 10 minutes, thank you, to take any additional questions. I know we just love being here together, and Marta, Mabel, we're gonna have to do a group hug before we end. But before we get to the group hug, So what other questions are out there from anyone on the line?
Esta mañana yo me levanté temprano.
Okay, so I see no other questions. I'm going to close us out. Next steps are I'm going to really do a very brief report from this webinar for the board of directors of the Darryl Chappell Foundation. I'll be sharing highlights with the board. And as I mentioned before, I rely on my board, my legal entity. They are my boss. So I try not to get in front of my board of directors, but I will be sharing with them the highlights of this, this webinar and some next steps that I recommend. I will continue discussions with many of you separately, in particular about some of the themes as it relates to the actual program that we may have in mind. So not to reinvent the wheel and not to get in front of my board, I will say that some of the work on Mac in the Barrio is of great interest and has been to our organization for a while. So we will continue those discussions as well. And then eventually I will be in Puerto Rico. I do plan on spending quite a bit of time there during my next trip to make up for all this lost time on the ground. Even with the amazing ability of technology, I still do think face-to-face is crucial. So I do plan on being in Puerto Rico for a significant amount of time in the future. Okay, any last comments from our panelists?
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity, Darryl, and most of all, thank you for bringing us the first step to work very hard with the Afro-descendant Caribbean community in Puerto Rico. I think that's the most important objective of this meeting, and looking forward for it, because without it, we didn't have flavor in our culture. I mean, that descendant and that contribution is so important that we receive from Africa. So I am more than grateful that you're working with that and working with us and helping others to continue what they have began working, as you have heard of them. So thank you for giving them voice and also budget to do their projects and to keep them going.
Excellent.
Thank you, Darryl. Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for making us your priority, your foundation's priority, and learning from this experience to share with other communities internationally. So it makes us very proud that you're looking into our community and to learn from our community to actually expand your projects in other communities in America and in the world.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank
It's been a pleasure.
Looking forward to, provoke any alliance to, to boost the creative sector in Puerto Rico.
Thank you, Agnes.
Thank you, Darryl, and thanks to all the colleagues in the panel who are doing an excellent jobs in their organizations and their projects. And those are the people who are moving the island forward. So thank you.
Absolutely. Okay, everyone, be safe. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.